Welcome back to the It Starts With You podcast. I am so excited today to have Jess Burgio on the podcast. So I actually met Jess through a mastermind. And one thing that I want to say is you've probably heard a lot when I have brought guests on that I have met them through masterminds, through networking. There is so much power in being in these containers. So Jess, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh my gosh, so excited. I know I love that too. I talk a lot about that on my show as well, but the power of like meeting people in rooms like that end up with connections like this. So it's so fun.
Oh my gosh. And we already, before we even hit record, for those of you listening, we were talking about so many different things. I was like, okay, wait, we need to capture all this. So I want to make sure I introduce Jess, and then we're going to dive into all of the stuff we have to talk about. So Jess is your high energy hype girl whose passion is helping women build the confidence to chase their dreams. Former beauty entrepreneur of 22 years, she is the founder and host of her own highly rated podcast show, Unscripted. She is a holistic life and business strategist, author, podcast mentor, speaker, and mama, helping entrepreneurs connect their voice to their brand, which, I just love that. Connect their voice to their brand through powerful content and podcasting. She is the founder of Media Unscripted, which is a full service podcast management agency, helping you strategically connect your voice to your brand to amplify your business. Jess is the go-to for all things support and strategy around helping you to take inspired action around your big dreams and goals. I get so excited just reading your introduction. I feel
know,
like you
right?
hyped me up.
How'd I do? I wrote that myself. Did I do
Oh my
okay?
gosh.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. And actually, I want to jump right in because when I read your bio, Jess, that connect your voice to your brand really stood out. And obviously, I help people to really own and use their voice. And I was like, the way that you said that and how you help people to do that. So tell us a little bit more about what you mean by that and how you really came to that.
Oh my gosh, I love, and no one's ever asked me that question. It was actually a really random, cool story. I was in a human design course / class getting, I guess, technically certified to learn human design. Really, it was just selfishly, I wanted to learn more about my own human design and how to parent my child and his design. And then also I had a newish partner when I was in that. And the room was actually filled, it was virtual, of over 150 people, and 100 of them were all projectors, which is what I am. And so I won't go down the rabbit hole of, the 5 designs in human design, but if you are curious to learn more about yourself, I would definitely sidebar that and go check out what human design is. I love it so much that I'm going to add that piece to my website because I do think it's important to learn more about yourself because it'll help you understand how you're meant to really speak and show up. And for those of you listening to this podcast, that's probably one of the reasons you tune in and learn from Julie, is because she's so good at helping you articulate who you are and how you can help people, right? So as I was in that course in class, I ended up saying something like raising my hand, actually showing up, speaking into the group. And she and I talked for a moment and she was like, that's why you're so good. I can't remember what was said, but she said, that's why you were so good in the beauty industry because you were able to listen and connect with people and really lean and learn into that. And when I took that piece from that business, being behind the chair, and tried to move it into another business, I was really unclear in the beginning, but it was the piece of connection and listening that allowed for me to say, people do really like to listen to what I have to say. And as I started to use my voice more, I realized that that was part of what my brand was that I had a strong voice and that I did have a message and that I did have an opinion, and all of the things that I thought were maybe holding me back or were too much of the things I shouldn't be doing were actually the things I should amplify. And I started the podcast because, well, we were shut down. We all know the thing we can't talk about. And it was after a long, hard road of opening my dream salon, but I was now in this space where I had the freedom and time and a little bit of extra money, which are usually the 2 excuses why we don't do things, time and money, to start a podcast. And it was all around the pain points of what was going on in the beauty industry. And it was through that, though, where I didn't know how I was going to show up and serve. I was getting curious about moving from a brick and mortar, trading time for money in a literal sense, to exploring the online space. And it was, yes, through the podcast and talking and having conversations and leaning into the gifts that felt like they weren't gifts at the time, which were being nosy and being kind of talkative and loud. And I learned that would make a really good host. That would make me someone who asked interesting questions. And so through all of that and 260 plus episodes of the podcast, I really did find my voice. And so I think the power of that builds confidence, and knowing who we are and what we stand for allows for us to really show up in our fullest expression to attract the right people in our life and our business. So yeah, I really do stand by owning your voice, and by using your voice to connect it to your brand.
Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness, there's so much gold in what you said. So I want to go back. I want to highlight a couple things. The first thing, also, I am not a human design expert, but for everyone listening, again, sidebar, I'm gonna have to we'll have to talk about human design. I don't know much about it, but I do know that I'm a manifesting generator, and I remember when I first started seeing it, and I know for my, that for manifesting generators, it's like to have a lot of different things, like to, not just stick to one project. And I just remember when I was reading it, I felt so seen because I am somebody who has lots of different things in the fire. And sometimes people made you feel like guilty, like, why do you have so much going on? And I
Yeah.
just felt so seen and validated. So for those of you, check out human design, so fascinating. And a couple things I really want to connect on that you talked about was this idea of leaning into your gifts and how this relates to your brand. Because I know for a lot of the people that I work with too, when they are trying to use their voice, whether it's in a corporate setting, whether it's in trying to get clients, whether it's podcasting or getting on stages, oftentimes people are so unaware of who they are, what their gifts are, or they are shying away from, like you said, leaning into the things that make them unique, leaning into things that make them authentic because they might feel bad about it or they might not know what they are. So when you talk about what was it that really helped you to feel like, okay, I can actually own instead of hide who I really am?
I think it came from years of trying to fit in and be like other people and do it like whoever they were that I was admiring or who I'd put on this imaginary pedestal. And to be honest, anybody listening, I don't care what you do for a living or where you're at in your life, you know that to be true. And it's just exhausting to try to do it like anybody else. And if you are chasing dreams and goals that are legitimately not yours, you won't be fulfilled and happy. You may have results that look like success, right? Meaning money or that, corporate ladder climb that you've gone through, or you own the business now, or you're a founder, or whatever label that equates success to you, but it won't feel aligned. And that's where things like burnout and depression and anxiety come from because we are not in alignment with what we're truly supposed to be doing. And many of us are never gifted an opportunity to figure out what that is. I mean, think of it like at 17, 18 years old, you're asked, I mean, even younger, what do you want to be when you grow up? We're like, well, I only have examples of what's possible in front of me. Right now we have social media. So we have an overabundance of opportunities and options, whereas it's almost worse now than it was before. Before you kind of stayed in your bubble. It was like ignorance is bliss. You could totally lean on that excuse. But we didn't know what it was like to pave our own way or to craft our own message and voice because we were so, I hate to use the word brainwashed, but conditioned to do things a certain way, live a certain lifestyle, hit a certain glass ceiling, strive for a certain level of success. And once a lot of people did that in their 30s and 40s, they quickly realized when they got quote unquote there that that wasn't where they necessarily ever wanted to be. And that can bring on a lot of emotions that feel like shame and guilt and depression because you've never stopped to pay attention to what it was that you truly wanted to do. And so anybody that I meet, whether they're in corporate or they're an early stage entrepreneur or an aspiring maybe entrepreneur or a really good number two, like say a great employee, if you don't quite know where you want to go, but you know where you're at isn't it, it doesn't have to suck or be miserable. You can have wants and desires, just like Julie was saying, as a manifesting generator, being multi-passionate, wanting to explore different things. I think that's true for a lot of people right now. Nobody wants to be put in a box. We might want things to be easy, right? Or, not so resist, but we want to be able to express ourselves and move through life and not feel like we can't. So I share all that because the podcast really opened up conversations that I had never really had before. It allowed me to ask questions and get curious. What does that look like for you? How did you get there? What did that mean? What did it take? Because we see a lot of people's after and their shiny, whatever on social media. And we don't know. We don't know what it took to get there. We don't know the 10-year, the 5-year, the 20-year journey. We don't know really their why behind it that drives them every day to have discipline over motivation, to keep showing up and doing the things. We don't know their dark seasons necessarily unless they've shared them. So there's so much to unpacking that if you spend so much time trying to figure out how someone else did it, wouldn't it just be easier to figure out how you would like to do it? I mean, to me, that takes off all the pressure of doing it right, whatever right is. And it also takes off the time pressure that we somehow, majority of us, put on ourselves and feel like we're too far behind. We haven't gotten far enough. And all of that is actually so negative and impacting us in ways we don't quite realize, because it's a form of comparison. And when you stop the comparison in all ways, right, it'll pop up, but you just have to recognize it, realign with what you and how you want to be doing things. And it always comes back to that place of authenticity. And for me, I'm
Mhm.
pretty bold. I like to speak my mind. I am cognizant of like how it will affect people. I'm not trying to be rude or ultra
Mhm.
polarizing or anything, but I learned that if I have some bit of a tone, if I want to use cuss words, if I want to be
Mhm.
really animated about something, that's going to be for somebody, and it's definitely going to be not for somebody. And so the podcast, I own that platform. It's mine. People can choose whether they want to follow it or not. And what it's done is it's allowed me to carve out this section of, audience slash community who does really relate with me. And that's great, because that's who I'm here for and that's who I want to serve. So,
Mhm.
all of that to say, like, when you just step into who you really are or start to explore what that looks and feels like, you will feel such a sense of freedom. And with that freedom comes, I think, a new level of confidence. And when we feel a little confident, we start to get a little more clarity. That clarity
Mhm.
helps us take action. And without action, we never really know if that's the right thing. You got to try some things on to see what that feels like. So I always encourage people to not only do one thing or to entertain different things. And that's like you and I got in that room and
Mhm.
everybody was so different, had different dreams and goals. But the one thing we all had in common was like a growth mindset
Mhm.
and a kind of attitude of, I don't know what I don't know. And I'm willing to like see if there's other ways I can go about, chasing my dreams and figuring out what I want to do and how I want to do it.
Mhm. Yeah, and one of the pieces that, you said a couple times that I really want to highlight is this idea of you're putting the reps in, you're building the muscle, you're building the confidence, right? So for everyone listening, like lean in and maybe like pause and rewind and listen to how Jess just explained that, because it wasn't that she went from, okay, these are some things about me and I'm just going to go out there and I'm going to have this podcast and be successful, right? It's like putting the reps in and getting more comfortable and owning who you are, which is part of that brand. Because what I see from a lot of people is they just aren't even aware of what their own personal brand is. And so they're not using their voice. And like you said, it's the building the confidence and putting the reps in and getting comfortable with who you are so you can attract the right people in, right? Because
Yeah.
to both things that you talked about is you're not gonna be great at it right away. Like you can't look at anybody. I mean, I've had a podcast for a year now, and it's still like, oh gosh, I have so much to learn because we're never there in a good sense. We have that growth mindset, we can grow, but also when you really start to own who you are, you attract the right people into your life.
Yeah.
And so if you weren't showing up, like you said, fully who you are and boldly and embracing who you are, then you're going to find yourself with listeners or surrounded by people who aren't in alignment with who you are. And then we look
Hmm.
around and we go,
Yeah.
wow, why don't I have the connections, the community, and the support of people I want?
Right? Like, how did I get here? And that's
Mhm.
where the terms like, I feel lonely come when you're surrounded by people. When you know you're literally not alone, but you don't want to, or you don't connect with those people around you. And I think it's cool that I'm able to be on the podcast now with you because I have a partner who's been in corporate for 25 years. And so we've been dating for 3 years and
Mhm.
he's pretty high up in the way and how he does stuff. He's able to talk and present, and it's funny because when I met him, he didn't speak of his own brand. He didn't talk about it in that way. And I'd like to think that I was a good influence on
Yeah,
him
yeah.
realizing that no matter where you're at in your career, whether, like I said, you're an entrepreneur, you work for somebody else, or
Mhm.
you're in corporate, you have a brand. And
Mhm.
we can't avoid that now. So you're either writing the narrative of your own brand or you're not, right? It comes down to even how you dress, how you speak, how you carry yourself. Are you the person who, when you walk in a room, you click up with the people, or do you see the one person sitting off to the side and you go and make sure that they feel included, right? What kind of leader are you? And those are the people that I think really get the opportunities to explore how to really show up and be a leader. And so I think anyone listening to this podcast probably is a high achiever and someone who craves
Mhm.
growth in their life and who wants to feel a sense of success and fulfillment. And it's great because what I think in the last 2 years, really for him, it's looked like is knowing that he doesn't have to stay there if it doesn't feel in alignment. There's been a lot of like changes with higher ups, and it
Mhm.
what once felt pretty secure and solid doesn't right now for him. And so it's cool that he's now not afraid to explore other
Mhm.
options because he's like, my brand is really good. And I'm like, I love that for
Yeah.
you. I love that you are owning that,
Yeah.
and that you know that you have options now, because there's no better feeling than knowing that you could do anything that you want versus the feeling of feeling trapped or that like, this is all I know.
Mhm.
So it's such a powerful thing to take ownership of.
And what would you say to someone? I mean, I work with, most of the people that I work with, they are working on using their voice, speaking, communicating, whether that's in front of a boardroom or that's on stage for people.
Right.
And oftentimes, what we find is people are trying to show up or speak like somebody else. They're trying to emulate somebody else instead of really being confident in owning their voice. And obviously, you help people with podcasting. We don't want you to show up the same way that somebody else does, even if you really like how someone else does their podcast. You don't want to show up exactly like that because there already is someone like that. So what's a tip that you have for somebody when it comes to maybe it's getting more clear on what their voice is or feeling confident to do it, whether it's something that you did in the beginning or something that you see helps people to really start to step into that, owning who they are and what their voice is?
It goes back to what you said at first. I think first tip would be to just put the reps in. Try things on for size. I mean, if we watch the news, all of those women talk the same. They all have the same
Mhm.
cadence, the same kind of like, tone where they all if you close your eyes, you almost couldn't tell who was who because
Mhm.
you can tell there's like a crafted way that culturally they want them to speak. And that's great. That's fine, right? But that means they're all replaceable because they're all the same. They've all learned to be the same. And I
Mhm.
think what helps people stand out in the noisy online space right now is to be just a little bit different. And again, it's not about recreating the wheel. Whoever you are and however you are authentically is enough and it's perfect. You're going to feel like a beginner if it is brand new for you to talk into a microphone or to pick up your phone and do a live or a story or something. I could not cut a straight line when I started cutting hair. I did not
Mhm.
do very good when I first started doing makeup on other people. I had to practice. And a lot of my results didn't come out good, but I didn't quit. I kept showing up. I kept practicing. How many people have you worked with, Julie, that you've, had that it took a few times for them to be able to memorize their keynote or to be able to feel
Mhm.
confident stepping on stage, to realize even what they were wearing and how that made them feel, their stage presence. Did I move a lot? Did I talk? Did I wave my hands around? There's so many components to it. And I think it's like any great athlete, you have to study the tape. You have to
Mhm.
be your own biggest critic in the best way, right? What level of expectation do you have of yourself? And then hold yourself to that. If you want to be the most interesting interviewer, practice, research what questions would make me the most interesting interviewer.
Mhm.
Am I someone who's not afraid to go there? Stuff like that. And I didn't want to be just another boring podcast host that had a list of questions. And I was in the beginning because I didn't know any better. And I wanted
Mhm.
something that was like repeatable. But after a while, I was like, you're really good at just leaning into the conversation and then letting it flow. I was like, oh, because I did it for 15, 20 years behind the
Mhm.
chair. So we all have things that we can pull from where we were confident at one time or we did do something that was hard and use that belief, use that confidence, use that proof to then take action and do things. But just know that if it feels weird and awkward in the beginning, that's totally normal. And I want to share a story. I hope those tips were helpful. But
Mhm.
um, again, the boyfriend got to speak and present and speak in front of Jamie Dimon. So he works for JP Morgan. And he was telling me how another woman was getting ready to present and he could see her from across the room kind of fidgeting and just like antsy in her seat. And he was like, she got to a really good point towards the end and closed it. And you can tell when she finally started talking about what felt good for her that she was comfortable with, then it flowed. He's like, but the first half of it was pretty
Mhm.
terrible. And I hope that that woman gets an opportunity to watch her tape back, if you will, or watch a video back of herself and kind of study, how do I want to be different? How
Mhm.
would I like to do it next time? Because if we don't take the time to get better or to have it feel more natural, that's going to show in your results of like people following you or connecting to you. It's not that you have to be a perfect polished version. You can take people along the journey with you of, oh my God, today's my first podcast episode. I'm so
Mhm.
nervous. I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm totally sweating. People relate to that. So you don't have to
Mhm.
pretend to be something you're not yet, but you have to put in the reps in order to ever feel
Mhm.
like you're that, right? But the second you go
Mhm.
live, let's just say for a podcast, or that you step on stage and say 5 words, you're now a speaker, you're now a
Mhm.
podcaster. So step into that fully and own that.
Mhm.
That's why I put that stuff in my bio. So every
Mhm.
time I hear it, it's a reaffirmation that I am. I know I'm a mom.
Mhm.
I know I'm a speaker. I know I'm a podcaster, right? I know I'm a coach.
Mhm.
So it's one of those holistic things where you have to believe it as much as you're hoping other people will believe in you. in order for that connection to happen.
I love that example you share because I often, with my clients, review tapes of them speaking. And the one of the biggest themes as I see is that first 10-15 minutes, you can see the nerves. You can see they're not really being as clear. You can tell they're not as confident. And then it can pinpoint the moment where it's like, oh, there it is. And they're hitting their stride. And so we talk about what do you need to do to prep beforehand so that when you hit the spotlight, when you turn on the mic, when you get on the stage, when you get in front of the camera, you're on and you've already kind of done that warmth. You've already got the jitters out. So I want to actually revisit, and I wrote down some of the things you said because just for those of you listening to write down some of the tips that Jess gave us were so good. So making sure you put the reps in, owning being different, keep showing up no matter what, keep showing up, review the tape. And it's uncomfortable, right? Like, let's just acknowledge nobody likes to watch or listen to themselves. Even as a speaker, even as podcast host, you have those moments where you're like, oh, wow, that was really good. And then you have the moments where you go, oh my gosh, what do I sound like? What do I look like? We all are like that, but you will only get better if you actually, like you recommended, is you have to watch it. You have to see, where those filler words, where could you have changed your tone, where could you have changed your body language, whether it's podcasting, if you're on video, if you're on stage, whatever it is. So those were such great tips. And then this last one that I absolutely love, of really stepping into and owning, this is who I am. Yes, that's right. I am a speaker. I am a podcast host. I am an author. I'm a business owner, all these different things.
Yeah.
And that actually leads me to, when I hear your background, Jess, when I hear your story, when I hear your passion, what you do, you've had all these different, I don't know if you use the word pivot, that's the word that came to me, is all these different pivot. You've been in all these different, spaces and places and experiences. So first of all, what did you do? What did you bring alongside with you as you were going through those pivots? And what would you recommend to somebody else who is either in a pivot or who's looking to make that?
I have this weird sense that anything is possible. I know that just about everything's been done, and that if you want to learn something or find something out, you can. And so I think with that underlying belief, nothing really intimidates me. I might not know the path clearly of how to get there, but it's never held me back from getting curious about something.
Mm.
And it may have held me back on taking action because I didn't know the next first step or the next right step. And I've made plenty of the wrong steps. So I am a little more apprehensive about, if it's a big investment, right, financially, or if it's a time commitment, not doing that. And so I did sit for like 2 years with a podcast microphone before I got started. And I let the tech and the overwhelm just like keep me from getting in the game. But you can never win a championship unless you're in the game. So I realized, like, you better figure this out as you go versus figuring it out before you take action. And I wouldn't have been the great hairdresser and makeup artist that I was if I didn't just jump in and start practicing. So again, back to those same points of like, it's probably going to take you longer than you think it is. And just like owning that and leaning into that. But the pivot for me happened because of different pain points that started to come up in my life. So first 10 years of my career, no problem working 9 to 9, 6, 7 days a week, working weekends. I love to work. I love what I did. I love the people I was around. I loved how happy everybody was. Majority of people come in happy to get a haircut, and they even happier when they leave. So this really juicy like transaction was going on, and all these hits of validation, if you will. So I came up really quick in the industry. I built a 6-figure business within probably less than a year, back in early 2000, which was wild at the time. I was 19, 20 years old, and it was easy in a sense. But when I look back, I worked hard and I was fully committed. I had both feet in and I was all in. That's why I got the results. I was unwavered. Like, I was going to make it work no matter what. Because again, in 1999, 2000, like, becoming a hairdresser wasn't looked at as a lucrative career. So I was kind of battling like this imposter syndrome / I have to prove everybody right or wrong space. So I think at that age, you're really hungry to like prove people wrong. So whatever that deep-seated why is, only but you have to really connect with that in order to keep showing up with the discipline that it takes to really get to where you want to be. And long after the motivation's gone, right? The motivation is what kicks us off and gets us excited about something. And that's cool. And we need that. And it's always great to find ways as you go through your journey to get remotivated or to motivate yourself in some way. But the discipline and the habits are really what helped me always know how I was going to get into something else. So the first 10 years of the career, great. Then I got pregnant. I had in that time gotten into bodybuilding because I was a competitive athlete growing up, and then kind of was missing that competitive nature. And so I got introduced to bodybuilding at like 25 years old and worked with a coach, ended up loving training clients. She and I kind of took over in San Diego. And then once I had my son, I didn't have as much free time I used to get up at 4 a.m., train clients, get to the gym, like all the things, right? When you can do whatever you want when you don't have children.
Yeah.
Then the seasons change, and then all of a sudden life's not about you. So I didn't want to miss out on certain things. And I started to realize I didn't want to work late anymore. And then I didn't want to work on weekends. So as things started to shift and pivot, I started to explore what would it look like to not have to be, location locked. And it was in like early 2018 that I had been, working with Lori through Strong Fitness Magazine, hosting fitness camps. So we go way back like 10 years. And her husband, Chris Harder, launched Fast Foundations, the mastermind for early stage entrepreneurs. But he said a key phrase that really landed with me. And it was, this is for accidental entrepreneurs. It was one of the taglines that he used. And I thought, oh, well, that's exactly what I've always been, was an accidental entrepreneur. And I got into the beauty industry to be creative, to have freedom of like creating my own schedule. And it just seemed like a fun career. And it turned out that it really was that you had to be a true entrepreneur / CEO of your own business, even if you worked inside someone else's salon, right? I had to own my book of business, and my clients would only come back if they liked the results that they were getting. And so it helped connect the dots as I looked back over my career as to what I actually was. So again, that ownership piece of putting in your title, I'm a CEO, I'm an entrepreneur. And then in that findings of my, I am qualified to own a salon. I have the street cred. I do have the passion. This seems like it's the next right thing. I guess I should try it. So then I went on to open a salon during that time where I was in that 6-month container of the mastermind. I started networking events for hairdressers. I started where I was, even though my big picture vision was really not clear, but I knew it wasn't only with my industry. But I, again, started where I was, and I started speaking to the people I knew that I would be connected with. And again, I started that during, the lockdown. And that just led to one thing. And after probably 50 episodes of recording with people in the industry, I was like, I want to talk to people outside the industry. I had been connected with other entrepreneurs through that mastermind. And I was just getting more and more curious about how could I make podcasting a business? How could I create a brand that had value, that people wanted to hire me for certain things, whether it was speaking or strategy or coaching? And I really just started to like explore what that looked like by either putting myself out there, offering my coaching services to people. I looked back at how I had grown my first business. I did free haircuts. I offered services at discounted rates. I put myself out there. I asked for the business, right? Like the non-scalable shit that nobody talks about anymore that actually helps you start a business.
Yeah.
Right? I think it's sexy to say like my business is scaling or like, but what does that really mean? Right? What does that really mean?
Actually
So
doing.
that's a whole ass another podcast. So that pivot was very slow, and it definitely didn't happen the way I saw it happen for other people, maybe in that mastermind or that were around me. I didn't have the like shoot off rocket trajectory of success. I had like when people talked about 10K months and 20K months, I'm like, I'm already doing that over here, but in a very like hard work, grind, if I don't show up, it doesn't happen type of way. Could there be another way that there's more ease, more flow, more spaciousness in my day? And I learned that in the online space, it's the fucking wild, wild west. Like you can charge whatever you want, like do whatever you want. And I was like, that feels good for me. Very similar to like the hair industry. So I share that whole backstory because I am kind of like the pivot queen, right? I went from hair to, training clients. I did both at the same time. I took one clientele and moved them into another arena of business that I could double down on. And then from there, I realized the things I loved doing with those women were connecting and helping them build belief that it wasn't about what they looked like. It wasn't about the haircut. It was about how they were showing up. And it was about helping them believe that they were worthy of whatever it is that they wanted to accomplish. And so I peeled back all the layers of like, what could I really help and serve with? And I started offering coaching. I started doing things at a discount. I offered courses. I put on events. I got in the rooms. I started asking questions. I kept going with the podcast. So I think you guys can hear that it didn't happen overnight, and that it took some exploration of like, just because someone else coaches doesn't mean maybe that's what I should do. Just because someone else has a course doesn't mean I should have a course. Just because someone has a podcast, you see where I'm going. So again, you really only know what feels right to you if you try things on for long enough. Again, one post on social media probably won't go viral. Guaranteed, your first 10 podcast episodes probably will suck and definitely won't go viral. So if you're willing to put the work in, if you're willing to explore like who you are in the journey, then it's all worth it. Then I say start the podcast. Then I say, create a structure and a schedule for showing up on social media. But in doing all of that, like you are slowly building your brand. And at any time, you can rebrand, you can pivot. I did a big pivot with the podcast. It used to be called the Beauty Inspires Beauty podcast. And like I said, around episode 50 to 100, I was like, this doesn't feel aligned for me anymore. I don't want to exclude anybody else. And I think people are getting the wrong idea that this is only like a business podcast for beauty entrepreneurs. I want to keep including them, but I want to open it up to include other people as well, because my passions and interests and experiences had started to grow. And so your business can grow with you and your clientele can change as you start to learn more, invest in yourself more. So you can see like it's a beautiful like journey that has really never felt limiting. It's like anything is possible. So, go for it.
And I just love that perspective and just like this very open, because like you said before, something around like what we've been conditioned. I was actually just having this conversation with my husband last night where it's like, isn't it crazy? And once it's like a whole nother world when you step into entrepreneurship or small business ownership. For those of you who aren't in that space, you probably hear me talk about it because I'm always authentic and honest in sharing the journey of like, it is not for the faint of heart. It's like this whole other world. But if you're in the space of growth and personal development, if you listen to podcasts and read books, then you do see that this like shift of what we were conditioned to believe. That's like, okay, you go to school, you do this, you go to college, you get the job, you make this much, you maybe have enough to take a vacation, all of those things. And what we're doing is we're peeling back all those layers to go and back to the question you said before is like, what would it look like? Or like, what could be possible? Right. So for those of you who are listening, who are thinking like, gosh, I either am in a pivot, I'm in a change, or I want to be like, I have some type of pivot I want to make. I want you to go back and re-listen to what Jess just shared, because she shared so many things around like, what would it look like? And that opens up your mindset right away to see the opportunity. And then a couple other steps you shared is like, get into the why. You mentioned you having to have the discipline and the habits, the I am, which I love that phrase. I don't know, Jess, if you know, I share this in my podcast, but I have I am tattooed on my wrist.
Love that.
Because for me, that's the most expansive thing, is to say I am. And then the words that follow are so powerful. So the why, the discipline and the habits, the I am. And then you said is just knowing that there's more, knowing that there's bigger things. And what I wrote down is just expanding your thinking, which sounds like what you really leaned into, is just expanding to see what was possible for you and how that can keep growing. Like there's no limit to that expanding. And I know we see this a lot. I mean, having met in that mastermind, and I know you're part of so many communities, you run communities, you just keep expanding. And as you do that and you get in the rooms, your group keeps expanding and they keep pushing you and pushing you. So it's not like you're ever like, oh, I'm going to reach this moment where I can't keep growing or I can't meet any more people. It's like, no, it just, your capacity to expand just keeps growing.
Right? Your opportunity for expansion happens. And for anybody listening that's like, I don't want to do anything different. I love my job. Like I'm happy. I dip into the wrong podcast episode.
Yeah.
This is for, take this in a personal sense, right? Where are you not allowing yourself to grow personally? Professionally, maybe you're where you're at and you're happy and it's it, Don't ever let anybody push you into doing things that don't feel aligned for you. It goes all the way back to the beginning of wanting things because you think you're supposed to. If you can sit in that like space of really just owning, getting quiet enough to cut out the bullshit of like, no, I'm good. If you know you're good, like sit in that. But could you be growing personally, right? Maybe you want to be in better health. Maybe you want to be spending more quality time with your kids or your family or making new friends. Maybe, you've been doing the same thing every weekend and you don't want to do that anymore. How can you step into a growth mindset that will feel like holistically? And that's why I call myself a holistic life and business coach, because with all my background with health and fitness and with being an athlete, I notice a lot of times people put so much emphasis on success in their business, but they forget about the personal part. And you can't have one without the other. You definitely can't hold any level of success in a healthy way that feels authentic and good to you if you are not right, if you are not good, if you don't know how to fill up your own cup. Something will always be wrong. somebody will
Mhm.
always have done something to you, or like you're always going to be on the defense. Whereas when you're taking care of yourself and you're putting your needs and priorities first, where you've got non-negotiables in place, you've got your own habits and boundaries, you really, things that are like a level 10 problem for people who don't take care of themselves, they're a 1 or 2 on the level scale to
Mhm.
you. You can handle more with ease. And I don't know anybody who wouldn't want to do that. So that's why, like, when
Mhm.
you work with me and I do the coaching pieces, there's so much more to it. Why is someone so nervous to stand up on stage? Is it
Mhm.
because they're not, educated enough in the thing they're speaking about? Generally, that's not it. You wouldn't have probably been asked to speak about that. It's you owning the worthiness piece of deserving to be on that stage, to feel
Mhm.
comfortable and confident in your body, to know that even if you do mess up, it's okay, right? Where did this pressure come from that we all have to be the same or perfect? And, it's the beginning of the year. And I don't know when this podcast episode is going to drop, but if you've been in that comparison, if you've been trying to do it like somebody else, you've been trying to run at someone
Mhm.
else's pace, that's probably why you're feeling resistance or you're struggling, because it's not yours. So redefine
Mhm.
what your goals are, redefine what commitment means to you, redefine what you're willing to in this season of your life be able to do. Because if I'm a new mom, I can't run at the same pace as someone who is single and or has
Mhm.
like financial support from a partner. That's going to look way different. And so when we mistakenly compare ourselves to the wrong people or look to people who are not where we're at, it really does mess things up. So, the
Mhm.
pivot can be in so many other ways. So I hope that helped somebody relate even
Mhm.
deeper, even if in both ways that's relatable.
I love that you shared that too, right? To share like wherever you're at. And I know what happens for me, and I'm thinking, for everyone listening too, is you're going to find that piece that you cling on. It's like, oh, I needed to hear that message, and you're going to relate it in whatever situation you're at, right? Where it's, yeah, I want to grow in my relationships, I want to grow in my health, I want to grow in my career. Wherever you're at, you can take these pieces to go, how can I implement all of these things to help me to do that? And I love when you talk about, that's something that I always talk about with my clients, having that certification in mental fitness and mindset. And I love talking and geeking out with other coaches on this, right? Because it's like the internal and the external. Someone comes and says, hey, Julie, I want to be better at speaker and I want to get better presentations, whatever it is. It's like, that's just like this piece over here. That's that external piece. Yes, we can help you put together the talk. We can help you do all this. But what we really need to work on is you feeling confident to own your voice, to use your voice, that clutter that's getting in your brain. And that's so important to be able to help people through that journey. So this was such an amazing conversation. I have so many notes written. So a couple final questions before we wrap up. The first one that I love to ask my guests, the name of the podcast is called It Starts With You. And obviously it has a lot of meaning to me, but I love to ask my guests in just a few words, what does It Starts With You mean to you?
Oof. First thing that popped in my head was my son, and it starts with me being a good example rather than trying to speak from a place of inauthenticity. I can't
Mm,
encourage him to be healthy and to live a lifestyle that I don't live. And so every day he sees me working out, every day he sees me having some vegetables on my plate, if you will, like the encouragement comes by me doing it, and also parenting, right? But that it starts
mm,
with me is I wanted to change some of the narratives of how I grew up. And I was like, the only way to do that is to do it by example.
Oh, I love that. And every guest, every answer is different. Everyone just hits with me. I love that. So being the example, especially for your kids. I was thinking, I have my son too. We call it your plant points. I'm like, how many plant points did you get today?
I
So I
love that.
absolutely love that. So setting that example. Jess, thank you so much for joining us, for all of your insights. And what I know is that your energy is so inspiring. You shared so many golden nuggets and tips for people. They're going to want to stay connected. So share with us, what do you have going on right now? What's going on in your world? And how can people find you and stay connected with you?
Thank you so much for having me. It's so fun to get to connect with other women who just, get where we're all trying to go, which is we're all trying to grow together, right? And so that's my mission, is to just connect women, help you connect your voice so that you can find more people who you can really lock arms with. And it's why I have a small group mastermind that I run. And that's going to, I think, start in mid-February. And then it'll dive right into the Unscripted live event that's going to be in San Diego early summer in June.
Mm.
And, I love hanging out on Instagram. I love engaging with people on social. You'll see all of my favorite Target outfits that I always share because I'm trying to get sponsored by
Ooh.
Target. I'm like, can a 43-year-old mom be, I don't know why not. I'm like
Yes.
their ideal
Yeah.
client. um, and I just love pouring into my listeners on the podcast and just creating community over there where we're allowed to unapologetically be ourselves. That's why I changed the title to Unscripted, because I want you to know that you can write your own script. You can rewrite your life at any time. So yeah, hit me up with any takeaways you had from today's episode. And the best thing you can do in validation for any podcast that you listen to is to leave a rating and review and let Julie know how her podcast is helping you, and pour back into the people in your life. Like, take a second, who in your circle or your bigger circle or people you want to get the attention from circle, who and how could you give a little bit where it just takes you 2 seconds, totally free, leave a rating review, screenshot somebody's shit and repost it on your social, like talk about somebody in a way that's meaningful. All of that takes 2 to 5 minutes and can make such an impact in their business and in them seeking validation, because we all want to be, you know, connected to our peers. And so when we see that other people are relating to our stuff and connecting with us, it really does give us that extra bit of love to keep going on days that are tough. And so, you know, however you can serve other people, I promise you it'll come back tenfold for you. And karma is so real. So do for others as you would want them to do for you.
I just love that. I did not pay her. I did not slip her any money to say, hey, right. But as a podcast agency, she knows. And I share that with people. It's like a warm hug, but it also is just like you said, on the days where I joke, I'm like, you know, the moments where like, is anyone out there? Like, I'm at the world of social media and everything just so loud right now. And you're like, is anyone out there? When you see someone share, when someone sends you a message, I got one not too long ago of someone sharing how, you know, impactful the podcast has been. It's like, okay, people are listening. So thank you so much for that. And thank you again so much for joining us. We will make sure that we drop all of the links for everything that Jess was talking about to stay connected with her, the info on the Unscripted Live with, oh my gosh, so exciting, the info on her podcast and agency, all of that, so that you can stay connected. Thank you so very much. And everybody, remember that it starts with you, and you are capable of so much more than you might be giving yourself credit for.